Hello, everyone. While folks get logged in, we'll give it just a second for everyone to get tuned in today. We appreciate you joining us. We're here to talk webinars. I'm here with the esteemed Ryan Goodwin from the Fundraising Event Company. And we're going to give it just a second for folks to get logged in before we kick things off. I do have just a little bit of housekeeping to share. So first of all, today's webinar, we're very excited, is with Ryan, who is celebrating a birthday. So happy birthday, Ryan. We're
Thanks,
excited
Sam.
to spend this time with you. Second of all, Ryan has been doing event budget work with me for over almost a decade now, for 9 years. This coming up on 9 years in which Swaim Strategies and the Fundraising Event Company have been collaborating together. The Fundraising Event Company is a subsidiary of Swaim Strategies and is our production wing. And Ryan leads the client services division. So we're thrilled to have him here talking about event budgets. A couple of promotional items for you. We have a couple of other webinars coming up we want to make sure you know about. So at Swaim Strategies, we're hosting a conversation with Golf Status on June 18th. That is going to be for those of you who have a golf event this summer. So if you have a golf event this summer, Logan Foote with Golf Status is coming just to give you top tips of ways you can make some simple adjustments to really increase your revenue. Additionally, the new auction performance report just came out from One Cause. So we're doing a webinar with our education partner, One Cause. We're going to be joined by Sarah Sebastian and Carrie Wozniak to give us the auction data report in July. So we hope that you'll join us there. You can sign up for these on our website. We want to thank all of our partners that make our education series possible. One Cause, the Fundraising Event Company, Golf Status, and ZP Productions are one of our film partners. Additionally, today's webinar is being recorded, and you will be sent that recording when it is live. Usually takes us a few hours to get it live, but you can find it on our webinars page. You can scan this QR code. We will also email it to you so that you have that available to you. And finally, one of the big things we're going to be talking today are about sponsorships. And so I want to highlight today's podcast episode of the Fundraising Elevator to make sure that you take some time to tune in and learn from Mariah Monique about sponsorship solicitation. She is with the Sponsorship Catalyst and has so much wisdom to share. And so definitely a must watch today. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to welcome Ryan. Hello, welcome. Glad you're here today, Ryan.
Thanks, Sam.
And I'm going to jump into a screen share of a budget so we can just dive right in. But before or while I do that, Ryan, I wanted to ask you a little bit about when you're sitting down with clients to talk about their fundraising event and their fundraising goals and where they're headed. You and I have a shared philosophy that all the answers can be found in this one document. So can you do a little like myth busting and share with us, like, what are the things folks need to think about and know when they sit down to start planning their budget?
Absolutely, Sam. It's great to be here. This harkens back to time sitting in your office just chatting about budgets. So this is a fun enterprise for me to do today. Yeah, some budget myths that we want to just bust. I think the first and foremost, it goes to we should just have 10% growth every year as the like founding concept of making a new budget. That that doesn't necessarily bear out for a whole bunch of conditions. I would really encourage folks to look at the data and look at trends in the data to be able to start to forecast what next year's budget's going to be, and then cross-reference that with real world conditions. I think we're seeing this spring, we're seeing different engagement from different groups that produce revenues, sponsors, partners, donors, that we need to take into account real world conditions as we're interpreting the data that we're using to start to make those forecasting.
I think that's a good point. I think that one of the things that I always like to dive into with folks is that the sort of challenge I find with leadership teams, board of directors, committees, is that there is a growth goal established from event to event. So we're going to target and raise 10% more. And my question always is, but what is the path to get there? Do we have a path to that growth? And for me, that budget is really a planning tool to outline and carve where my time goes and how I'm going to reach that goal. So I think one of the myths that I experience so often with organizations is that our budget is expense related. And I think that, yes, that's a part of it, but I think there's also the revenue part. So Ryan and I have a budget tool that we work in all the time that we're going to share with you now and kind of talk through some of those decision points. And that budget tool starts with, if I can share here. Are you able to see that, Ryan?
Absolutely.
Excellent. It starts with the revenue side of things. So our budget tools usually are really simple Excel document or Google Sheet where we can look at both the budget revenue and then we have a tab across the bottom to dive into the budget expenses. So I wanted to start with the budget revenue because I think there's a couple of key things that make for a good budget. One of the starting areas is that we always divide our budget into thinking about our pre-revenue and our day of event revenue. So pre-revenue to me is like access. It's our sponsors, our tables, our tickets. Day of event revenue is what are we going to do during the event to raise money from our attendees, our donors. This is our auction or our paddle raise. We call this special appeal. And I'm looking to get really nitty gritty about those targets so that I have a really clear path. So there's a couple of data points that I am always looking for before I come to this document at all. And that first data point that I always want to look at is what fundraising goal am I trying to hit? So I know what I'm working toward and building toward. And how many people are we targeting for this event? Oftentimes I'm looking at past events. Ryan, where are you looking to kind of expect and anticipate headcount?
Well, first we have to take the venue. We can't put more people in we can't exceed the size of the venue. So that's the first boundary that we're working within is how many tables, how many tickets can we actually sell? And then that gives us an expected number of donors. And then that gives us an expected number of donors that we expect to actually give at the event. So those are those first targets that I like to really set and make sure that I have a clear understanding of.
Agree. I think it's important that we have sort of the parameters we're working within because we've sometimes had organizations plan for 100 people at their event and then plan for 300 gifts coming in the paddle raise, right? And that's just bad math. It's not possible. So understanding how much our venue capacity is, to reiterate what Ryan said, understanding our target headcount based on both that venue capacity as well as I sometimes look at our past attendance. And then understanding what our target is, how much we're targeting as our fundraising goal to see if it's even possible to get there. And sometimes I find that we can actually far exceed that goal once we do this mapping. So now that I know what targets are, I start diving into a couple of key areas. Ryan, I typically start over here by identifying prospects. Is that where you start?
I like to have them there, but I like to I actually start one layer deeper now. I got burned very early in regathering after the pandemic of having a ticket price that didn't cover the actual cost of attendance.
Oh,
So I very much like to at least have a ballpark understanding of what the cost of attendance is. And if I know that, then I'm not a fierce advocate on much anymore, but I'm a fierce advocate on making sure that your ticket cost covers the cost of attendance. So after I put all the target prospects in, the first thing I do is try to get that cost of attendance, and then that sets my ticket price. And then from that ticket price, I can go up the scale from tickets to tables, and then I can also understand how to start the valuation of sponsorships, knowing where that floor is for that beginning sponsorship valuation.
you just dropped a ton of wisdom. Let me break it down for folks who haven't done this type of sponsorship work before. So first, ticket price. What do you use to inform on ticket price decision?
So mostly I'm looking at the confluence of venue, catering, and some part of either decor or AV, and then dividing that by the number of anticipated guests to start to get what are the hard costs of doing this event, whether one person or 900 people come to this event, that that we're going to be paying out and making sure that we're not financing folks to come to our event.
Well, so let's start there then. You're talking the expense side of the budget. So I clicked over to the expense tab, and here in the expense side of the budget, we've outlined a lot of the anticipated expenses we see frequently with gala events. This is specific to galas. You can modify this for a dinner party, for a walk, for a golf tournament. But these are a lot of the needs that we have associated with a seated dinner gala event. In that, I begin typically by taking a look at getting real bids so that we understand, because like you said, Ryan, you've been burned post-pandemic by rising costs. You've been burned post-pandemic by the sort of expense associated with events. So I look at real costs. So I will typically go and get real bids from my auctioneer. I will lock in that venue and get real dollar amounts from them about what to anticipate. And I will ask for a bid for catering and AV, so I know really what my costs are going in. So I first will develop that sort of real ID planning of how much it costs, then divide that by my head count to understand if my single ticket price that you see here, the ticket sales dollar amount, matches or covers the expense of our event. And so in this particular case, I've identified a $200 event as the real cost of this event. I think pre-pandemic, we were seeing a lot of galas in the $100, $150 range. We are now seeing most galas closer to $200 to $500 a ticket, depending upon the elements that you have included. So
Yeah,
that's a lot of information to start with. We're talking about expenses. We're talking about analyzing headcount just to get to the decision-making point of your ticket sale. What would you add to that, Ryan?
yeah, I just think that if we take this amount of intention, then we're not just sort of navigating in a foggy realm. Like we can actually look at those pieces, and I like to call that the three-legged stool of catering, venue, and AV. That's just the foundational piece. And if we know what that cost is, it's very easy for us to extrapolate a ticket cost and understand our event going audience has not become contemporary with the rising costs. And this is a big pushback that we've seen with event goers, is they don't see the value in the ticket cost being that high, but it's been a process over the last 2 years to really have folks understand why event costs have gone up. And, I just believe that we're worth protecting ourselves against financing folks to come to our event.
Yeah, I do want to put a little sort of asterisks in there to talk about allowing for tickets that are not at that cost too. So I want to circle back to that, but I see that Molly has a question. Molly, I'm going to open up the opportunity for you to ask your question. There you go. If you want to unmute, you can jump in with whatever question, and we're happy to answer before we move on. Molly, I've given you that opportunity, but also if you didn't mean to raise your hand, we can keep going. All right. Well, sounds like maybe Molly doesn't have a question. So Molly just took her hand down. So if you do have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat or raise your hand. We do want to make sure that you are getting your questions answered. So once we've identified our head count, our expenses associated with that head count, and our ticket price, therefore identifying how much it's going to cost us for this event and dividing that by our attendance base to get to our ticket price, I sometimes will modify that ticket price to look toward equity and how we create access for people, because it is important for us to think about all of the other resources people bring to our organization and how we build community that may not be those top donors attending the event. So in this particular case, I have at least added and built out the fact that we will have some volunteers, some staff tickets, and some comp tickets associated with our event. We work with an organization that provides client services to patients in a medical clinic. And it is important to them that part of their mission and part of their work in building the budget for their event is that they're budgeting for 100 of their clients to participate in the event. So they adjust the ticket price up to accommodate that those 100 patients are invited as their guests to attend without a ticket price associated. So when folks are talking about sliding scale or they're talking about access points, consider that in that math equation you're doing, where you're looking at your expense divided by your head count. If you can fit 300 people in your venue, but you want to accommodate 100 people without a ticket price attached, then take that expense and divide it by 200 people to get to the real cost for your ticket. So with that kind of as step one, now we've identified what our ticket price is going to be. I tend to jump into my prospecting for my tables and my sponsors, because that is where I can see a path toward my fundraising event. So I do that here on the right side. I start to develop a prospect list of sponsors that I think might return, or that we have a relationship to, or are related to a board member. I take those sponsors and I add them here to the prospect list. Ryan, what are other ways that you identify, or what are ways that you incorporate potential prospects into this part of the process?
Yeah, we talk to our clients about there's three main sources that we want to utilize to create these prospect lists. Obviously, we want to carry forward confirmations and yeses from previous year's events. So that's the first building block. But if we stop there, then over the years, we're going to cull our prospect list down pretty tightly. So then I asked them to go back and look at who they pitched sponsorship to in the past, and it came back as a maybe or a no, or if they interacted with the organization in a different way, to ask those folks again. And then there's like the new prospecting piece of like, do you have new service providers, insurance company, all of your vendors that you need to operate? Plus, do you have new board members or new community council members come on, and do they have connections that might bring new prospects to the table?
And so you then build in a list of prospects at each level based on how much we know about their giving history, how much we know about their history with the organization. For me, I take that prospect list once I identify how many people I have at each level that I'm prospecting, and I tend to budget a conservative path, meaning how many will say yes at each level. So in this particular case, you'll notice at the $5,000 level, I have budgeted for 4 yeses. And yet you can see that I have 5 prospects. So I tend to go on the more conservative side of assuming that not everyone will say yes. In this particular case, there were some aspects that I was considering. So with this event, I am budgeting for Salesforce to be our presenting sponsor because they have been a presenting sponsor at that level for the past year. They had come up from a year prior, so they have a 3-year relationship with us. And we have been in conversation and relationship prospecting with them to know that there is a pretty certain likelihood that they may come back at that giving level. So I went ahead and budgeted for them to say yes at that level. At the $5,000 level, I have a couple of returning sponsors, 2 of which have already confirmed and told me they're in, they're sold. They want to be a part of this event this year at the same level as they were last year. And then I have 3 other prospects that are partners that we've collaborated with in the past that I'm also going to be targeting at this level, but I'm going to be a little conservative and assume that not everyone says yes. Then I move to the next level and I identify that here I have a lot of new folks that I've added. So while I have a number of real good, solid prospects, some of these are folks that said yes last year, but also some of these are like new board members, companies, and a new organization that we started doing some, partnership business with. We have added and only budgeted for 6 at this level. So pre-event, I'm developing a pathway for myself to understand, based on my prospects and real targets, not imaginary, let's grow by 5%. but real prospects, I'm now developing a path for how to get to my budget. Now, let's say, for example, I'm trying to hit 90,000 in pre-event revenue. And I only have 81,800 in this current prospect list. That's where I can make some informed choices and have some honest conversations with folks about why I need to get a little less conservative in my budgeting. So for example, because I think I have like 9
You
prospects
have
here,
9, yep.
yeah, 9 prospects, I might add another prospect at this level instead of the 2000 level. So take away from our table and add to our sponsorship. I'm doing that because I'm trying to keep the head count at 300. You'll notice that if I leave my table hosts at that level, my head count now went too high and I'm overselling my event. So I want to make sure that if I'm moving a sponsor up, I'm taking away from somewhere else to keep my head count at the appropriate head count for the room. But I'll keep adjusting my budget to try to get this number to grow and to increase. I'm currently about $8,000 off in my budget. If my goal is to try to hit $90,000 here, I need to figure out another way to raise that. So I might have a conversation with my board about who else could we prospect as a top presenting sponsor. So we have 2 at that level. Or are there additional folks that we could move up to the $5,000 level? So this gives me the information to have an informed discussion with my leadership team, my committee, and my board about where we see opportunity.
A
Ryan,
couple of, yeah,
oh
go ahead.
yeah, no, I was going to ask you about tables, but go ahead and jump in there on
Yeah,
sponsors.
a couple other options as well is there a specific event element that folks could sponsor, like the after party or the bid card or community tickets? That's a different revenue source that you might have a very niche sponsor that wants to engage with you in a specific way that those might be enticing. And it's funny to think I'm actually more conservative than you around the budgeting, Sam. Like if I went from 6 to 7 for the $3,000 sponsorship, I would also ask our clients to go find 5 more prospects, so that we're at a 50% yield on that. So like that's part of it as well. To me, that's part of it as well. Like if the prospect list isn't a bunch of return clients, I'm looking at you're going to get about a 50% yield on good years. So I really encourage folks to look more broadly, or look for folks to, like you said, to move up their support to fill those spots.
There's a couple of other things that I just want to highlight because not everyone does a model like this. So I just want to flag in this model that we typically, our standard policy and protocol is that we build the ticket price to inform the table price to inform the sponsorship levels. So the ticket price is being at 200 for this event. We have a tables of 10, therefore our table price is 2,000. We don't try to play a game there where we modify like it's 2,500 because you get an item or because you get, something else. It's simply ticket equals 10 of the table. And then on top of that, you get sponsor benefits or recognition benefits tied to sponsorship that then, as those benefits grow, their dollar amount grows. So our presenting sponsor is getting more benefits than our table host, just to give you some comparison. Okay. Daryl has brought a solution to the table in our budget deficit that Daryl has suggested. What about adding silent auctions to boost that bottom line? Daryl, you've given us a great segue to move into the conversation about day of event revenue. So day of event revenue becomes an opportunity for us to also work toward how are we going to hit this fundraising goal? How are we going to reach our $200,000 goal for the event? And how do we maybe compensate on the day of event revenue? So this is where we start to play with what elements do we have at our event? And sometimes this informs me about where our time and attention is best going to be spent. I always start here with our paddle raise. I don't know about you, Ryan. Where do you start in the day of event revenue planning?
100% with the paddle raise, because I think there's a universal concept here that also works up above. Is I'm looking at for the development department, I'm looking at the number of asks it takes to reach the overall, the budget goal within that segment, but also the overall budget goal. So to hit most of our revenue in the pre-event, in the pre-event realm, we're looking at getting 25 yeses. Versus if we were trying to get, it would be solely a ticketed event, we would need 300 yeses plus a whole lot more revenue to hit the same amount. And I think the same is true down below in Dave event revenue. I'm looking at what's the most efficient path in the number of asks I need to make to be able to hit my budget.
That bears repeating, Ryan. I think that what you're speaking to is return on investment. Like, how much time do we actually have in our work? And while I think that there are tools and resources to help save us time and increase what's possible, I think we have to look at how many asks, how many solicitation, how much work goes into the dollar raised. So the paddle raise, we also call the special appeal. It's called lots of things, but it's that direct ask for cash during the event. It's a direct donation. It is your big bucket of gold the day of. And so I'm always looking at how do we make the most out of that moment? Then I'll start to add in the other layers. Now, Daryl, to your point, the silent auction is missing on this budget because we have found in the past couple of years since the pandemic that with a lot of organizations, not all, but with a lot of organizations, transactional giving has been declining because it directly competes with that socializing. So we have seen a lot of organizations migrate their silent auction into an online auction that's sometimes held even independent of the event or an association. Or we have sometimes found that the transactional nature doesn't appeal to younger donor demographics. So we will frequently build into our plan revenue models based on who's in our room and what our room looks like. So in that particular situation, if we are in a school where this is a community of folks that are very close and they're all parents at the school and they all have something to contribute, to Ryan's point about return on investment, we might have a silent auction because it's easy work to procure those items. But if we're at let's say an organization that's working on food access, doing the work of program development, outreach, food access takes so much time that rarely do we also have the depth of hands and resources available to make the most out of the solicitation process for a silent auction. Silent auctions tend to be the lowest yield with the highest time consumption. So that's why in this particular budget, we have not added a silent auction in. We might with some organizations, but I tend to start first with that paddle raise. Then I dive into the live auction because that's our second highest form of revenue. And then I identify if I need like a raffle or game or a lower dollar access point for our donors. Now, in this case, I live in a state where we have a raffle law that only allows us to raise $10,000 in raffle. So I'm going without a raffle license and following lottery rules. So I'm going to go ahead and cap my raffle there because then I don't have to manage a lottery process. Additionally, I am going to have a live auction in this event, but because I need to increase my revenue, instead of adding a silent auction, my donors tend to like to show their giving. This is an audience that likes to be recognized for their giving in big ways. So the live auction is more appealing to them than a silent auction. A live auction also tends to raise 100% of value versus 40% of value in a silent auction. So I might just procure higher value auction packages because they raise about 100% of value. I could increase the value of what I'm procuring and help to close that gap. I could also add one more package to my live auction to help to close that gap. Now, I want to be careful about how many live auction packages I have because time in your program can get really long. But that's one way that I can close the gap. Another way that I can look to close the gap here is by securing a matching gift for my paddle raise. Now, in this budget allocation, I have a $30,000 matching gift that already is confirmed by Brittany Bogsworth. She came to us and said, I want to leverage my support I want to show up at the event and have my dollars matched. So that is not a part of my budget plan because she approached me with that gift. So let me add that into the budget and see how that shifts my revenue targets. So now that just like increased my giving to be above the target that I had for this event of 200,000. So these are all choices we're making in the budget process. We're making choices about, do we add a silent auction? How much do we procure? Do we add a live auction? How much do we procure? Based on how much we're trying to raise and who's in our audience. Diana, I see that you have your hand up. Let me go ahead and unmute you so you can jump in with your question.
Hey, can you hear me?
We can.
Great, perfect. Can you go back and apologies if I missed this? You made the comment that younger generations you see are not liking something because of its transactional nature. Can you expand on that a little bit more? What was that specific to doing a silent auction? And if that is the case, I guess what other methods I would say is more appealing to those younger generations?
Great question. Thank you for that, Diana. I appreciate you jumping in. Um, yes. So there's a shift that's been occurring generation by generation. And Giving USA does an annual report about generational giving and how they prefer to give. Currently, when you look at giving in the United States, major donor giving is still the bulk of giving in the country, meaning like that's where organizations are yielding most of their revenue from as individuals. And of those individuals, over 80% have still identified over the past decade that their preferred giving model is at an event because they get recognition, they get to be in community, they get to feel some connection and belonging. The shift that we have seen, though, is that boomer generations love the gamification, the activity of winning something, the opportunity for taking something home. Therefore, older generations, we're seeing the live auctions are still very popular. Silent auctions still have an appeal. When you move into Gen X, we started to see folks move more toward the recognition was the primary driver. So live auctions, paddle raises, very popular. But silent auction, they're more interested in connecting with each other. Then when we move into millennial generation, and especially Gen Z, the current young donors coming into our sector, the request, the need, the desire, the awareness of their gift was direct impact. In fact, if Gen Z could skip your organization altogether and go directly to buy a meal for the individual versus funding your mission, they would do that because they want direct impact. So when we start to add transactional activities like a silent auction, a wine wall, gamification, those are less appealing to younger generations than that paddle raise. So we
Thank
have
you.
a lot of organizations that have just moved to the paddle raise. When you ask about like supplementing revenue, the paddle raise is the answer. Hopefully that helps. All right. We missed one item here, Ryan, that I want to tap into, which is this lovely little thing that says cash donations before the event in the pre-event revenue. Can you talk about some of the like sort of choice there and the psychology there about that?
Sure, I think it's an opportunity to, I mean, there's where, how far back do you want me to go with this? So to me, this is an opportunity to access a portion of your donor base that may not view an event as something that they want to be able to support you at, but they want to support you in lieu of attendance. And to me, there's a couple of vehicles by which to do that. And I've actually come full circle maybe twice on this around if you feel like you have a activated donor base that doesn't necessarily vibe with events, this is a really good opportunity to broaden your formal invitation list, send out, even though it's a bigger expense, send out a more broad formal invite to folks in anticipation of getting some gifts in lieu of attendance instead of ticket purchases or table purchases. And I think we're also seeing folks, I think to your generational talk, I think we're also seeing some younger folks that absolutely want to support and absolutely want to make sure your event is successful. They just don't have the feelings to be there themselves. And this is a great vehicle by which that they can feel like they've been a part of it, and you can feel some revenue that comes unrestricted.
Yeah, it's easy low-hanging fruit in the like ROI conversation of where your time is going. Usually I do budget for a little bit. I see this number is actually significantly higher than this. I've only budgeted 8 gifts at $100 each for this event, but we sometimes see $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 in pre-event revenue just from folks saying, I'm unable to attend, but here is my donation.
Yeah, Sam, we have an event coming this fall that it's a little over a $300,000 budget goal, and they're expecting $15,000 in gifts in lieu, and they will absolutely hit that. So I think it's a hidden revenue generator if you do all the strategic steps to enact it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to get too nitty gritty into the auction elements because they can get a little complicated, but I do want to give you just a little bit of math for some budgeting here. If you are building a budget with a live auction in it, a lot of times we have folks that say, great, I need 8 packages. Check, I got 8 packages. Now we're going to hit our budget goal. The goal there is that you need to look at what the value of those packages are, and you need to average that you're going to be raising about 100% of value. Now, one package might go for 60 and one package might go for 120. But if you procure an average value of what you've budgeted in your budget, so here I have budgeted for all of our auction packages to average out to about $2,500 in revenue per package. Now, I'm going to sell a $1,000 package and I'm going to sell a $6,000 package, right? There's going to be variations there. But the very first piece of information that I look at is when I add up my auction packages, do they average the value I'm looking for? Because if I've only procured $500 and $1,000 value packages, I'm very unlikely to sell them at $2,500 a package. So that's a consideration as you're procuring that will inform your committee or your procurement team about what to go after. That $100 gift certificate in the live auction is not a live auction package alone, because it's not going to help you reach that fundraising goal. So that's a consideration in your budget strategy. The second piece of that is your silent auction. If you are including a silent auction, so to Daryl's note, let's say this audience is a little bit of an older audience, and we have folks that have been coming to this event for years with a robust committee that's very involved with procurement. So we are going to add a silent auction to this event. That silent auction only sells for 40% of value on average. So 40% of value, because it directly, great questions, Diana, I'll jump in there in a moment. 40% of value means that you are directly competing with the socializing at your event. Silent auction is like I could be bidding or I could be talking to a friend and getting a drink. So with that in mind, we're going to budget significantly lower on the revenue. We're going to budget to sell our packages maybe at an average of, let's say, $150 a piece. We're not going to fill our silent auction with rooms and rooms and rooms and tables and tables and tables of auction packages, because that's buying like, or that's creating like a garage sale atmosphere. We want just a few hand selected items that really create like a competitive bidding environment. So we're just going to sell 20 items. We're going to keep it tight. But when I look at that math, when I look to see what that yields, it's only about $3,000. So if I want to earn $150 per item, that means I'm procuring something that's actually closer to about $400, $500 in value. So I might need to increase the value of my silent auction in order to increase what it sells at. All that to say, the two numbers you need to know is that the average silent auction sells at about 42% of value, and the average live auction sells at about 100% of value. If you have an auction data software that you utilize, you can look at what your percent of value was last year and carry that over in your budgeting process. You might find that your live auction sold for 120% of value, so you could budget accordingly. So Diana, you're asking about the live auction. Do you use a live auctioneer and how much does one cost? Yes, absolutely. On the expense side of things, if we were to have a live auction or paddle raise in our event, the number one thing that I want is someone on that stage who knows how to raise money in a way that feels good, in a way that recognizes our donors and celebrates our donors, in a way that leverages the matching gift opportunities, in a way that hits fundraising goals. So if I'm spending any money at all on my event, it's on two things. It's not on my food, it's not on my venue. I'm putting all my money in the basket of good quality sound, because if people can't hear you, they can't hear your stories, they can't hear your program, you've lost the opportunity. And I'm spending my money on a fundraising host or live auctioneer. And that live auctioneer is not a commercial auctioneer that's selling cattle. It is a auctioneer that is certified and benefit auctioneer. It's a benefit auctioneer specialization is the certification.
BAS. Preach, Sam. Preach. Those are the two elements, like good sound and someone from stage that has a special skill of fundraising. Do those things.
Those are probably the two biggest, best resources. Now, to your question, Diana, about how much it costs, you can see here we put $8,000 in the budget for artisan auctions. This is an auctioneer named Kelly Russell. She's located out of Indiana. She travels all around the country to auctioneer, and we collaborate with her a lot. But there's a whole host of great auctioneers we can recommend. If you let us know what area you're in, we can make a recommendation. You usually will spend between $5,000 and $10,000 for a good benefit auctioneer, but it is worth it. They bring and raise that money, and they make giving feel really good. The other element I would add is that they're doing this 3-4 times a week, so they know what's working. They can act as a consultant to you and help you make some decisions too. So Ryan, let's jump a little bit over here onto the expense side.
Sure.
So we talked about Abby's Closet in Portland. Oh, Diana, I would recommend a couple of folks. So like I said, Artisan Auctions is in the Portland area. DC Auctions is also someone that we work with a lot in the Portland area. And then I would also recommend a former auctioneer of Artisan Auctions that's now working on her own. And that's Alex Zimmerman, and I think she'd be a great fit for you. She's fantastic. So a couple of different resources for you. If other folks have questions about auctioneers in your community, let us know. We'll make some recommendations. So Ryan, we talked about auctioneer and AV. What are other like expenses right now that have been either shifting or surprising you? I know you said you've kind of been bit post-pandemic by increased costs. We're seeing tariffs create increased costs. We're seeing access and delays to content creating increased costs. Where do you think we need to like focus on in the expense side of the budget?
I mean, I think the big pieces, because it's such a big light item, is catering, and it's not necessarily, it is the food, but it's not the food that costs. It's the staffing has a huge increase, and if we short the event with staffing, it's felt right away. You can feel an event that's understaffed, even more so you can feel an event that doesn't have the appropriate amount of food. So that's a place to really take into account. You're going to get what you pay for, but know that it's not the same numbers that we were looking at in 2019. And I think connected to that would be decor and rentals, all of those pieces. And again, it's a staff heavy element. That staffing costs there have also really added a little bit to those line items. So there's ways that you can become more efficient with those pieces. You know, we've always talked about lighting is the most cost-effective decor elements that we can use, and that's something you can work with your AV team on. So it's decor that's not rolled into a decor budget, but for sure those are the elements that I'm looking at right away and doing that cost benefit analysis of what are we getting for what we're paying out.
I totally agree with you. I think that AV can have such an impact on decor. We're seeing now that like projection and lighting can create the vibe without a lot of other money spent. I want to talk about catering though. Can you go a little bit deeper into some of the alternatives you've been doing for catering? Because I think we so frequently think with like a gala event, we think of a plated dinner. It gets teased all the time, like rubber chicken dinner. You've been doing some out of the box thinking about food and food offerings and food service and format of event in order to mitigate that cost. Can you talk about some of those formats you've been doing?
Sure, and some of them are out of necessity, and some of them are really just be able to use funds in a different way. Um, we've had several clients lean into the fact, especially on a weeknight event, maybe even a middle of the week event, a Wednesday, Thursday, opting for a very heavy appetizer service. That's very heavily deployed during the pre-program socializing, and then and then from our perspective, we're looking at calorie dense, nourishing, nutritious food items that also span the whole dietary need spectrum. And that's been really, really well received. And then it's a fun way to have a little surprise and delight post program of having another little snack or treat and then some dessert as folks are, talking about the shared experience they just had. And it comes in, even the most extravagant means by which to do that comes in less than a 3-course plated dinner, from food costs, from rental costs, from serviceware, from staff. Like it cuts off the top of all of the different areas in a catering budget.
Yeah, I think that the nice thing that that does too is it creates a shift where instead of the food being part of the program and getting people like seated and focused while they eat and pay attention to the program, your food becomes part of the socializing and the party. And then your program can be theater style seating, which often then reduces the cost of the venue because you don't need as big of a footprint for the venue. It's a popular shift we've seen in the past couple of years, to really think about like how to maximize your budget and size of space.
And
I
it's
have,
unlocked, it's also, sorry, Sam, it's also unlocked a whole bunch of venues that we
yeah,
couldn't fit a seated, tabled event at. So performing arts venues and old style theaters are now like very much, very much able to be used as event venues.
which I think is a solution for a lot of our rural friends often. We find that like big ballrooms are so limited in small communities. All right, we have a couple questions I want to answer. I am about to cough. Hold on. So sorry about that. So a couple of questions about auctioneers. I see Kristen is joining us today. She's in the background answering a couple of questions for us. And she's given a little bit of detail here about benefit auctioneer certification, and we'll add a couple of links to some of those auctioneers. For Jennifer, you asked about Chicago area and how do you talk your board into this expense? So one, in the Chicago area, there's 2 auctioneers I highly recommend that you take a look at. Artisan Auctions, she's not far from you. It's a very short drive for her, and she works in the Chicago area a lot. Kelly Russell is her name. Or Star Benefit Auctions. They're actually based on the East Coast, but they do a ton of work in Chicago. And Star Benefit Auctions are Aaron Ward and Bobby D. They're 2 different auctioneers. These 3 options range in pricing from about 8 to 12,000, depending upon their availability and their schedule and their travel costs. As far as the board conversation goes, they could actually help you in convincing your board. So I always like to bring my auctioneer to a board conversation so that they understand directly from the person what it is that they help to move the needle on. The biggest thing that I would say is if you are setting big fundraising goals and developing a really strategic special appeal where you are raising that paddle at high dollar amounts, you want to make sure that the person on that stage is making your donors feel like they are so loved and so much a part of the community and that they're hitting those targets. It is hard to do that if you don't have someone that's trained on that stage. Ryan and I have done this work together for decades. Ryan, would you ever get on the stage and do this?
No, I equivocate this to, you wouldn't hire a caterer that cooked Wednesday night meals as your caterer for an event, because they don't have that special skill like a chef does. Your auctioneer is the chef of your fundraising. Like, it's as simple as that. It's a specialized skill that absolutely pays for itself. And it's
I
not
agree.
something you can just have anyone that's an extrovert on stage be able to do the same thing. It's not, they don't have the same skill set.
It is, I mean, they go to school, they get a certification, it is years of training, and it is years and years of experience that they're bringing to your stage. The other component, though, about it is that there are other areas you can cut that the guests will not necessarily notice that could have a big impact where you could put that money here. So, with a little like fun AV, you could cut a lot of your decor items like floral. You could cut a lot of your like, props and staging elements. With the addition of an auctioneer, you also could have someone within your organization be your MC instead of paying for an MC. You could use a playlist instead of a DJ, although I think DJs add a lot. That's another area that you can have some cost savings. So, Jennifer, if your goal is fundraising, then the number one thing I would want on my stage is a fundraiser. So that's where I would start. Jesse, for your question, you asked about Jonna. Jonna Lee Wells is with Benefit Auctions or Benefit Auctions 360, and she's fantastic. She's a great auctioneer, world championship, often is booked. And so if you are able to get on her schedule, there is a returning list for her where she has a very solid base of returning clients. And so often getting on her schedule is a little bit harder, but if you're able to, she's a great auctioneer. We highly recommend her. And then auctioneers on the west coast of Florida, Daryl, great question. Let's see, Tawana Kinney is someone that I highly recommend. She is based in Houston and works a lot on the Gulf Coast. And then let me think. Daryl, I'm going to email you other options. I need to do a little searching. There's a couple of auctioneers that are in the New Orleans area and in the eastern side of Florida that would be great to look at. So I'll pull a couple of names forward and look for you. Okay, excellent. Well, big picture, as we're moving kind of into the close, I wanted to just highlight for you that having a budget tool at the very beginning of your planning process will help you to answer your questions. Now, if your event is a month away and you haven't done this, but you feel like you have gaps, doing this could help you, right? Like taking on a budget process like this might help you find where the gaps are missing. We have a couple of resources for you. We have a budget tool like this that you can download, and it comes with a chapter out of our book that is all about how to build that budget, questions to ask yourself, and what the math formulation is that you want to use. If you download this tool on our website, you'll find that all the formulations are built in. So a couple of resources for you. The other thing that we want to flag is that in our podcast, the Fundraising Elevator, we have really detailed breakdowns as well about things like a paddle raise, about things like hiring a benefit auctioneer, about things like sponsorship that can all help inform your budget decision. So if this is the first time you've done this, take a look at our lineup. We have a specific playlist of how to plan your event and a lot of episodes in there for you about how to answer some of these questions. So before we close, I want to leave room for any other questions that we have. So if you have any questions, drop them in the chat or raise your hand and we'll turn on your mic so that you can jump in with questions. We have a question from Linda about auctioneers in Sioux City, Iowa. The Midwest auctioneers are a little bit more challenging for us, Linda, in that we often bring to our Midwest organizations auctioneers that are on the coasts, because this type of fundraising with paddle raise is so prolific on the coast that there are very few in the Midwest that do this type of fundraising. And yet it is growing and evolving and rapidly increasing in popularity. I would recommend for you Artisan Auctions still, because she's probably leading the movement in the Midwest around how to move toward this type of very active, celebratory, joy-filled fundraising. So I would take a look at Artisan Auctions.
Sam, also Minneapolis is an area that does some of this fundraising style. Is that right?
That's true. Yeah, Minneapolis definitely has caught on to this fundraising style a lot faster than some of the sort of the South Coast and the East and West Coast have been doing this fundraising for about 30 years. And the Midwest has only started doing this style of fundraising where it's very interactive and it's very like paddle raise and paddles in the air for auctions only in the past probably like decade. So there's been an evolution that's been occurring. Minneapolis is definitely an area where you see a lot more of that. But for Sioux City, Linda, I'll do a little digging and see if I can pull other resources forward to you, but take a look at artisan auctions as well. Okay, questions about can you post a link and chapters of the book? Yes, absolutely. So we are going to send you all a follow-up and you are going to get resources for how you can find all of these details. We will link to all of the podcasts as well as all of the resources so that you can find all of these. Our goal is to give you the how-to. I think that it's important for you to have an understanding as you dive into your fundraising event about how to maximize revenue so that you're not simply just planning with hopes, but you're actually planning with a strategy. So our teaching and all of our education work is really built on that. So we will be sure, Lindsay, to follow up with all those links for you. You'll get an email from us after this. And Diana and Linda, thank you so much for all of your questions. Thank you, Jennifer. We also will, a couple of things I want to share as we close out. We have a Substack offering as well. Substack, we have a free subscription you can join. And in that we do a Q&A as well as having a lot of like downloadable articles for free and resources on there. So we will send that as an option as well. There are a couple of, let me share with you the PowerPoint just so you can see. There are a couple of resources here. We have our budget template that you can download on our website. We'll send you that link. We have our upcoming webinars that we highlighted for you in June and July. We hope that you'll sign up and join us for those. And then we will have our recording posted here. So please take a look if you want to come back to this over and over. We welcome any additional follow-up questions that you have. Ryan, if folks want to get a hold of you, what's the best way that they can find you?
Yeah, either on our website, thefundraisingeventco.com, or give us a follow on Instagram, and our link tree has all of those links to connect with us.
Great. We are going to send you our personal email addresses. If you have follow-up questions, please email us. We are happy to support you and help you in any way we can. Like I said, a bevy of free resources that we're going to send to you as a follow-up. And good luck in your fundraising. I hope that you find some solutions by diving into your budget before you start your planning. It will inform a lot of those choices for you. And thank you for joining us today. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.